morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is your girl Jodi with Whispers ASMR. Whoops. And today, we are going to be reading creepy true encounters. So sit back, relax. Thank you for coming to my channel for the first time or back to my channel. I really appreciate it. And if you would be so kind as to hit that subscribe button in the right corner of your screen, that would be great. And if you like the whispered content, then please leave a comment and give it a thumbs up. So my name is JodiAsmr, and I truly appreciate you all being here. But let's jump right into reading scary true encounters. So I wanted to put in here before I continued on that this board that I did yesterday will be revealed at the end of this video. So I hope you like the way I'm doing this, where I'm recording me doing resin, and then I'm actually recording myself reading the story, then I put it on top of it. I think it's less editing, and even though it's recording twice, I do believe that it's easier and it's better for you guys. So you can sit back, relax, fall asleep, watch me pour resin, or just listen to the story. So we're gonna go to Reddit, creepy encounters. Creepy encounters. I was wondering if you all would want to hear Am I the A-hole? Those can be pretty funny. A bear on nature trail. Several years ago, me, a 25-year-old male, probably 21 at the time, was taking an afternoon walk down the nature trail just outside my subdivision. Note that this trail was right next to a moderately busy two-lane road with some houses on the opposite side of the road. The area wasn't desolate. However, there was a line of trees and foliage that stood between the rail of the highway and the trail of the road, obscuring the view of one side from the other. So it made it appear very private, and people passing by could not see anything. Nobody would have a clear view of what transpired on this day. At some point, I spotted a woman in her late 20s, I would guess, standing alone in the middle of the trail. She stood there and watched me as I made my way down the trail towards her. As soon as I got close, she asked me if I could lend her my cell phone. She would want it to call somebody. Now, enough scary stories, and let's not meet subreddits to know about tactics like this. I've heard the stories about how women would ask for aid, get people in a vulnerable position, and then a man or two or three would swoop in and take the mark by surprise. I hesitated. I still gave in to the social pressure and desire to help another person in need. I gave her my phone despite my better intuition. I was, however, on edge. I tensed up and began looking around to see if anyone would pop out from somewhere, ready to react should someone show up. I also made a point to remain standing in arm's reach of the woman. All of a sudden I hear rustling from the bush. I instantaneously turned towards the sound and watched as a man looking around the same age as the woman, quite notably shorter than me, emerges from the foliage. I was probably glaring at him with very obvious suspicion as he made his way over to the woman, standing at her side without saying a word. The woman reached out and handed me my phone, saying they did not pick up, not even reacting to the man's presence. I grabbed my phone and left. What I assume happened is that they were planning to mug me, but ended up failing for whatever reason. Maybe it's because I was visibly on edge. They figured it wasn't worth trying to get the drop on me. Maybe the guy figured there was too much of a size difference between us. Or maybe just already put his plan into action, made a little too much noise and bailed, while keeping a complete cool face as he made his way over to his presumed significant other. For my part, I was ready to grab the woman and use her as a human shield. Maybe push her on him. Glad I didn't have to do that, especially given the outside possibility that there's some non-mugging explanation for this. The plans probably did change, I'm going to guess. As he comes out of the bush, he sees how big you are and how far away you are from her. Now, if your back was standing to him, he could have easily come out and mugged you. But the possibility that you are standing facing the bush he was coming out of would not give him sufficient amount of the surprise tact or factor. Just my guess. Were they trying to recruit me for prostitution? I saw a woman, maybe 30, 40 years old, well done up, bleached hair, normal looking enough, and had a face piercing that looked nice, eyelash extension. She was pretty. She was standing outside of a store looking like she just smoked a cigarette or was on her break. Something to that effect. I asked her for a cigarette. She gave one to me, then asked how my day was. I replied with, not going well. She didn't ask me at all about my day or why I was having a bad day or anything like that. She seemed to be kind of slurring or stumbling over her words. She just started complimenting me and asked if I had a lighter. I don't smoke, and I didn't. I noticed her teeth were kind of messed up. She kept complimenting me and telling me how pretty I was, how everyone must know how beautiful I am, and I must get that compliment all the time. Oddly showering me in compliments. I was being friendly and said, "Thanks. We have the same piercing," and she just kind of fake chuckled and continued to compliment me. It was making me uncomfortable. I was intentionally trying to steer away from her complimenting me. Not in a way she was trying to get with me, though. She didn't like me like that. I can't explain it, like she saw that I was having a bad day and maybe trying to scoop me away from my life, scope me out into the world of something. I don't know. It felt like like a business interaction, potentially. I don't know. The woman who came up was not attractive or unattractive and looked maybe 25. Immediately, she forgot about me and started walking with her. This is in downtown Portland, Oregon, in a relatively dangerous spot at 6:30 in the evening. Could she have been trying to traffic me? It really didn't seem like a genuine conversation. I was so confused about the interaction with the other woman because it really seemed like they were great friends, but they had just met. Maybe she wasn't a trafficker. I don't know, it just felt like it. My intuition tells me that's what was going on, or maybe she was scoping me out for drugs. I don't know if she was trying to traffic you, but maybe she was trying to scope you out to see if you had any money, like rob you, or steal from you if you had anything on you. I don't know, but the strange thing is that this other woman came up and totally took her attention away. I don't know. Very odd. The glow of a cigarette at dusk. For context, this happened to me years and years ago when I was 13. I grew up in a small to mid-sized city in the West. Pretty safe in a quiet middle-class neighborhood. This was back when I still bought into organized religion, and I was going to an overnight lock-in at the church gym for the non-Christian kids who aren't familiar. It's basically a huge Jesus-focused sleepover for teens. The church was only maybe a 10 to 12 walk from my house, and the quickest way to get there was to cut across a park right next to the elementary school. Now, this was the early 2000s. I definitely grew up in the age of stranger danger and teaching girls to always be vigilant. On the other hand, I was walking a short distance through my neighborhood and to the church, my own neighborhood. I was very responsible for my age. I'm an eldest daughter, always the babysitter. My parents had okayed me walking by myself and would drop by with my sleeping bag and pillow after they picked up my little brother from practice. I was running late, so the sun was just setting as I approached the park. I crunched my way across the grass next to the tennis courts. I noticed movement at the corner of my eye. Quickly turning my head, I saw a figure, a man dressed in dark clothing and leaning against the brick wall of the school. He was tucked away into an alcove formed where the building met the fence and around the playground, out of sight from the road. The man is standing just outside the halo of light from the lamp above a nearby door. Now this man, just lounging in the crooks of the wall and the fence, what initially caught my eye was the flicker of the lit cigarette in his mouth. It was too dark to see his features, but I could tell as I noticed him that he was already watching me. He was a fair distance away, across the grass and across the playground, but it was all open space between the playground and him, and I had to walk through that. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them on me. I felt uneasy, that tingly, creeping feeling down my spine. I suddenly realized that I was alone in the growing dark. And here was someone unknown. A stranger, a man tracking me with his eyes I couldn't make out. Instead of continuing to cut diagonally across the park, I veered right towards the sidewalk and the street so that I would not come too close to him. I walked a little faster, trying to shake off my uneasiness, telling myself, "You're just being silly." The first time I glanced back was back under the street lamps, which by now had flickered on, only 3 or 4 short blocks until I was at the church. I glanced back once more to reassure myself that I had worried for no reason, expecting to see nobody there. By now the man should be completely out of view. Instead, I felt the pit of dread in my stomach turn to acidic fear when I realized the man was in fact halfway across the park now, walking towards me. I immediately crossed to the other side of the street and began walking faster. At this point, I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my body. I did not have any real words or images to describe what I thought would happen to me, just a jumble of snippets of news reports, vague fears, and what happens to young girls out alone at night. I was still trying to convince myself that it could just be a coincidence. The man could just be walking in the same direction. After another block, as I approached the next corner, I looked back again. The man had reached the edge of the park, and instead of walking straight ahead, he too had crossed the street to my side. To make matters worse, it seemed like he had closed some of the distance between us, and, at least in my eyes, it seemed like he was walking quickly, a lot faster than he was walking before. I felt my terror increase. What do I do? I was convinced he was a predator, and I had made myself easy prey. I still had 2.5 blocks to the church, but at this point I was wondering whether I would ever make it to the lock-in. I glanced back at the man once more, and he had closed the gap even further with his longer legs. I still couldn't clearly see his face, but I had seen enough. I turned around and started all out running up the street. My backpack thumped against my back, my heart racing, my breathing turned shallow. I ran all the way to the church parking lot before I looked back again, and by the time I did, the man was gone. To this day, I have no idea if that man was after me, or if he just thought I was some weird kid running down the street at dusk. Frankly, I'm glad I never have to find out one way or the other. You are lucky. That man had no good intentions, I promise you. I promise you that. Creepy guy when I'm in the park. A while back, my husband and I wanted to check out a park that we had never been to before. It's on the outskirts of a smaller town. Just a small forested park with a few walking trails. A parking lot for about, 20 cars or so. We get out of the car and walk over to the information board while a man in the only other occupied car in the lot started shouting random nonsense at us. There were only 4 total cars in the lot. There were not a lot of other people there. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was creepy. He kept shouting religious questions and random nonsense, so we didn't feel safe going on the trails into the woods. Instead, we got back into the car and drove to another park on the opposite side of town, at least 10 miles away, not a straightforward route between the 2 places. We go and have a nice hike, come back to the car about 30 minutes later, and guess who slowly drives past us? You guessed right, the creepy guy from the first park. We could not imagine that he just happened to follow the same route and ended up at this same other park as us by random coincidence. But the thing is, I want to make sure he didn't follow us. He did not follow us out of the park, and no point was he behind us while driving. How did he find us? My guess is that he went around to each park in the area. Luckily, he did not realize, or you were not still on the trail when he got there. Stalked at the reservoir park. This happened when my best friend was 17 and a half and I was 17 in 1996. My best friend Chrissy and I are both smaller females. She is 5'4" and at the time weighed 110 pounds, but was a soccer player, very athletic and strong. I am 5'7" and at the time I weighed 125. We were both blue-eyed blondes and were often asked if we were sisters or cousins. There is a large reservoir on the outskirts of our town, surrounded by a beautiful public park. We figured we would walk around the park and it would be fine. Lots of people go hiking there. I'd gotten some really good quality weed and we were looking forward to finding a peaceful place to smoke out in nature. I had my pipe ready in pocket and we were stoked. We chose to go out on a Saturday. It was beautiful, sunny day, and there were not many people there. We parked our car by the reservoir in the mostly vacant lot that had only 2 other cars. We did not see anybody when we got there. We walked around the water for a bit and then chose a trail to go up, about 80 degrees out, and we were sweating, but we had some water in a small day pack. As we got about a quarter mile or so into the trail, I started having a weird, creepy feeling. I looked at her and quietly asked, "Hey, do you feel something is off here? Everything is really quiet." Where there were usually crickets chirping and frogs singing, it was completely silent. We did not see anybody at this time, so we continued forward. We were both getting pretty nervous. We heard the crackling of leaves and sticks behind us. Again, when she confirmed, "Yeah, I think so," we heard more crackling of leaves and twigs, now about 60 feet behind us and slightly to the left. Now we did not see anybody at this time. We continued forward, getting really nervous. Again, we hear the crackling, this time probably 40 or 30 feet. We still did not see anyone. Each time we would continue forward, we would hear footsteps a little bit more behind us. I thought we were being stalked. There was a turn off to the left, which led to a clearing by a large rock about 12 feet high with a large sturdy rope anchored onto it to climb up to the top. It was part of a steep hillside of the cliff. The rope to climb it was anchored to the ground as well, so one could not move it. I told her, "We need to get up that rock now. We need high ground." She nodded and went up first with me right behind her. We flew up that rock, clinging to the rope tightly and going as fast as our feet would take us. We reached the top. We turned around and see an older man, about 45, with slighter build, wearing a jacket, jeans, and glasses, coming into the clearing. 20 feet away, he looked up at us with a cold, vacant expression. I got goosebumps looking at him. I shouted, "Hi, will you please leave us alone? We're trying to have some privacy here." The man made no response to this. With a blank expression, slowly walking towards the rope which led to the top of the rock. My friend at this point was really scared and asked, "What do we do?" I saw a large rock about 8 feet and almost square to my right, so I grabbed it. I was surprised at how heavy it was, but my adrenaline was going, so I could lift it pretty easily. I told her, "Look around for the biggest rocks you can find. Fast, move them next to us. Hold the biggest one in your hand. If that guy tries to come up, we throw these at him and hit him as hard as we can. Aim for his head." Gosh. Fortunately, there was a pile of sizable rocks behind us to the left, like someone had made a ring to hold a fire on top of the rock and then moved them away. She brought a few over and held a large one for herself. My friend stood close to the edge of the rock, holding our makeshift weapons. I looked down at the base of the rock where the guy was considering the rope. He looked up at us again with a very cold blue eyes, no expression. I shouted loudly, "Do not come up here. If you try to come up here, you're going to get really hurt. We are aiming for your head with these rocks. Get the fuck away from us." I held the rock close to my chest so he could see it. My friend was next to me doing the same thing. We had a pile of more rocks. He blinked his eyes and cocked his head a little bit, then released his hand from the rope and silently backed away. He backed to the edge of the clearing, back through the brush, still watching us. Then we heard his crunching footsteps go back through the woods until we couldn't hear him anymore. We stayed up on that rock for 20 more minutes, maybe more, waiting and waiting. There was no other way to access the rock except for the steep hillside covered with poison oak, so we did not think he would try it, and plus, we would be able to hear him if he had. After we didn't hear anything for a length of time, we decided to make a break for our car. We threw several rocks down to the ground. Mine hit the dirt in particularly satisfying thud. Chrissy went first down while I was keeping watch in case he came back, like he had crouched down and was waiting for us. When I was scaling down the rock, she was holding a rock again, ready to throw it in full force if he returned. Fortunately for him, he did not. We each grabbed the largest rock we could, put a few smaller ones in our pockets for a good measure. We headed back to our car on the trail very carefully and quiet. Now, this is the creepy part. The crickets were chirping again, and nature was active, so we felt that he must have left, but we were still extremely cautious. We did make it back to our car without incident and quickly left. That was the last time I've ever hiked in that park. This is terrifying. This man had sinister plans for you. Multiple creepy encounters over the course of 7 months with the same persistent man. I feel lucky these encounters all occurred in public places. For reference, I am a 24-year-old female. I have freckles and naturally red hair, and I am around 5'7". The first time this man, who appeared to be about my age and height, approached me while I was in a popular downtown bar with my best friend. I saw this man approach and I was not interested, and as though not to lead him on, I kept my responses short. The conversation went as follows. An intro line was, "You have so many freckles. They are in such random places." I said, "That is how freckles work. That is how you know you are a real redhead." Emphasis on real. Alright, I am now creeped out because I know what he is referring to. I say, "I am well aware I'm a true redhead." He lingered to ask a couple more pointless questions until my friend and I managed to walk away. My friend and I ended up going to a different bar across the street later in the night. We had settled into the new bar. We were a little drunker, and my friend went to the bathroom, leaving me at a high-top table against the wall. Wouldn't you know it, but the same man appeared out of nowhere to my left and put an arm against my table and the other against the wall. I had nowhere to go, saying to me, "You're the redhead from before." I was extremely uncomfortable, but I figured my friend would be back soon and would be able to help me out of this situation without causing a scene. He asked me several awkward questions. Meanwhile, I had secretly texted my friend to hurry back to save me from a creepy guy. Then he asked, "Take a picture with me." I said, "Why?" He says, "For the memories." Just like that. I was still trapped. I was hoping if I complied, he would leave me alone. I let him take picture of us. Never do this. While I was faking a smile, a hostage smile. Fast forward 1 week. My next encounter with this same man, was a completely different and very busy bar with a different female friend. I was having a good time and suddenly I looked to my left. There's this man, I kid you not. He's running, emphasis on running in my direction, phone outstretched with the picture he forced me to take with him on the scene, on his screen. I had enough. I was done being polite to save his feelings, and I sat there, freaked out. I told him, leave me the hell alone, you creep me out. He venomously replies, well, you are an ugly bitch anyways. My friends catch when something is going on, and as he walks away, they offer to protect me if I need it. For months, I thought it was my last interaction with this man, but I was wrong. I had taken it as a warning, an example of how men's demeanor can change once they've been rejected. This was chilling. 7 months pass by. I have completely forgotten about this guy. The prior encounters disappeared from my mind. I was casually browsing a drugstore makeup display at night after the gym, looking down at a product when my spidey senses started going off. The hairs on my neck stood straight up. Someone was standing on the other side of the display and staring at me in my periphery. I look up. A man 2 feet in front of me. I did not yet realize it, but it was the same man, because I hadn't really taken note of what he looked like, until he asked me if the drugstore we were in sold chapstick. It is a drugstore, he said. Everyone, without fail, sells chapstick. Taken aback by my initial thought that he assumed I was an employee and replied, I don't work here. He smiled a slow, evil, sinister smile as he maintained eye contact. Said, okay. We both continued shopping until he returned to the makeup aisle I was at in that store. He says, I have met you before. I told him I don't think we have, as I truly did not remember him quite yet. He began to ask me questions that every girl my age in my city would answer yes to. Have you been downtown before? Oh yeah, everyone has. But like every weekend, not every single weekend, but last summer with your friends. At this point, I was getting horrible feelings in my stomach. Everything about his body language, demeanor, and the things he was saying felt off. And he was staring at me. Just staring uncomfortably at me. Strained. He insisted 2 more times we had met. Would not let it go. Now here's what I suggested. Lots of people confuse me with other redheads. They have met before. I'm sorry I don't remember meeting you. He stared through my soul after a moment and said, slowly, no, I know the redhead I spoke to. I didn't know what to say. All of a sudden it came flooding back to me. My blood ran cold. Goosebumps were all over my skin, and I could see his desire to slice my throat in his eyes. I started walking to the register as he followed me. As I walked, it was really clicking everything that had happened. The picture he took, how he must have been following me all this time, and I was more than horrified. I was in fear for my life. His social unawareness and weird questions made me sure it was him. I played it cool until I had paid for my items and I was leaving the store. I didn't look back, but I knew he was see his head looking back and forth, across the dark parking lot for my car. I know he saw my car leaving the parking lot. Shit, now he knows what my car looks like. Since it was at night, few people were at the pharmacy. It was clearly me leaving. I took note of the car he was walking to, and I decided to take an extra long route home to ensure I wasn't being followed. This route led me through a wealthy neighborhood at the far east end of my city. There's nothing that way aside from high-end homes. I looped through a roundabout in this neighborhood, and I saw a car matching his driving straight through. There was no way to know if it was his, however, it was chilling. There was no sign of his car after that. Fast forward a couple weekends later. It was St. Patty's Day, and the bars downtown were packed, as I have never seen them before. I was in the same bar he had first approached me in months before, alone as I was waiting for my friends to get through security. This man rushes up to me from the crowd. He says, "Hey, I know you from CVS." I had to assertively tell him to leave me the fuck alone multiple times. He kept asking why. "Do you have a boyfriend?" I responded again, saying, "None of your business. Leave me alone, you creep." It is interesting how some men only seem to take another man's claim to a woman as a no, and not a woman's obvious and direct disinterest in them. To this day, another 7 months later, that was the last time I saw him. That I know of. He could be stalking me. He could be watching where I live. He knows my car. But as for this, I am truly lucky these encounters were in public. They could have easily turned violent. I wrote this hoping to show other women being assertive at times. Rude is completely okay and necessary to protect yourself. Some men do not take no for an answer. To this day, it baffles me why he would try so hard to make me remember him after he called me an ugly, ugly bitch. He only called you an ugly bitch because you rejected him. This man is a creep, and for some reason has it out for you. I would not let down my guard for 1 second when you go out. My dad's friend, Al, and his wife were passing through town, so they stopped by our house to visit. I've always been comfortable around Al, but it's just getting to the point where I can't stand to be around him, and I feel bad. He forces me into multiple hugs during his visit and then kisses me on the lips. They last way too long, and it feels like our torsos are touching. He also runs his hand down my body when he pulls away. And then he goes in for the kiss. It's so wet and sloppy, it's so uncomfortable. It's extremely obvious I am uncomfortable. He sat right beside me on the otherwise empty couch, to the point where I was quite literally squeezed between him and the arm of the other on the couch, and he put his hand on my knee, rubbing it. He kept making comments about how pretty I was, which aren't inherently creepy, but with the way he was saying it, the tone in his voice, and how he was caressing my knee was weird. I honestly want to tell my father how uncomfortable Al makes me feel, but I'm afraid he will not take it well. They're best friends. Or will tell me I'm overreacting. I personally do not think I'm overreacting, but I just wanted to get an outside perspective. Overreacting. This is disgusting. This man is molesting you and hasn't even asked for your okay. I mean, this man is a problem. This is his best friend's daughter. You absolutely need to tell your father. That just bothers me. hasn't stopped racing. This just happened and I still don't feel safe locked inside my home. I was outside with my puppy for about an hour. She kept getting distracted by a bunny. I walked around the apartment complex a few times trying to get her to the bathroom. I am waiting for her, hopefully, to use the restroom because it's past midnight. I feel a little bit nervous being out that late when nobody else is. So one of my neighbors starts walking up to me. She barks at him. He doesn't stop trying to approach. I yell out that he shouldn't come up to me in the middle of the night, and he only responds with a, "Hey there, hey there," in a weird, almost condescending tone. I raise my voice and I tell him to leave me the fuck alone, and yes, if my dog will bite, I say yes, just stay away, even when I quickly walk away, taking the longer way to loop around my apartment because I needed to put as much distance from him and I. He stood there. He just stood exactly where I was moments ago watching me. I looked back every second. He's still watching me, undressing me with his weird eyes and personality approach. But here's the thing, this isn't the first weird encounter with him. This man has literally tried to approach me before where I was not alone. I was with my sister. And then once when I was with my father. It's like he's watching me, waiting until I am alone. He must have seen me from his apartment window. Because this is the first time I was alone in the middle of the night. I feel like I'm being followed. I was in New Orleans for a work conference. It was early. For a dinner, I was seated at a little table next to the piano for a cocktail before my party came. This man was adjacent to me at a table. We started chatting. Very benign. I was relaxed. It seemed okay, like we were just having a normal person-to-person conversation. Waitress comes back to me and told me that the man paid for my drink. That's fine, I said. Tell him thank you. Minutes later, a waiter came over and told me that he'd like for me to join him since he's dining alone. I told the waiter to tell him thank you, but I'm waiting for my party. I'm seated with my group and his table is right next to ours. He keeps staring at me the entire time while he's eating. Unnerving, to say the least. Maybe he thought I was an escort. I don't know. But here's the odd thing. The rest of the dinner party noticed as well. After he was done eating, he stayed at that table, continuing to stare at me, watching me eat and talk. It was so uncomfortable. We left that night and he did not follow me, at least that I know of. Fast forward to the next night, I go meet some friends at a hotel bar to listen to live music. Mind you, this is in a completely separate part of town. New Orleans is huge. I go to the bar to grab a drink and this man is at the bar again, staring at me in a disdain look. I had maybe 3 other occurrences in my life where I felt this psychic attack, a deep, unnerving, violating feeling. I've dealt with plenty of creeps, but for some reason this one was different. Very different. May have been almost kidnapped, or possibly something else. 3.5 years ago, this happened. I think about it every single day. I will start by saying that I was not being very smart. I was in Miami with a friend who is now my boyfriend. We were vacationing, blowing off steam. 28 at the time, he was 25. We are both gay. I decided to download Grindr and see what was going on. Don't do this, please. Long story short, I met a guy and went to his place for some fun. We had it, I had a blast, and we had some drinks. I was feeling great. Now at 11 p.m. at night, time to wrap up and head back to the hotel. I saw that it was about a mile walk, literally straight down the road, and I headed out. Well, I had taken some Adderall and was feeling a little more reckless than I normally am, and decided maybe I would hook up with someone else. I know what you're thinking. I logged back on Grindr and instantly connected with such a hot guy. He invites me over, gives me his address, and also says he could come pick me up. I am standing on the edge of this sidewalk, wondering if I'm going to get picked up or call an Uber to this location or just go home. Someone pulls up in a truck and said they are here to pick me up. I feel, okay, wow, you came, that's really nice. I literally remember looking at the picture of the guy and feeling very confident they were the same person. So I hopped into the truck. Instantly, I had the weirdest feeling. The truck smelled weird. First of all, I do not know how to describe it, like the taste of licking, like blood, like licking iron. I was instantly turned off and felt really, really weird. He starts driving. Thankfully, I did not close out of the Grindr app when he pulled up because it was so abrupt. Because I looked down and literally noticed that I'm getting further away from the guy I was talking to. They were not the same person. I remember that I just started texting and talking, being like, I really like your blonde hair, your gray truck is great, cool, this is a 2014 Chevy Silverado, right? I told my friends about you and have to be home by 12. Just FYI, we can go to my hotel. They'd love to meet you. Trying to make it seem like I have people waiting on me, that I disclosed parts of his identity, anything. This lasted 2 to 5 minutes until he pulled over and he wasn't feeling like hanging out. To this day, I think I was picked up by someone who saw an easy target, but thankfully I was slightly resourceful in the moment. You gotta be kidding me. That guy had zero good intentions at all. At all. Stalked on my walk. I do have the story on my page, but it was a smaller subreddit. I wanted to post it here as opposed to a YouTube page. They commented on my other post with similar title. But this was a true story and happened to me. Short back story. This happened almost a year ago. I'm a 19-year-old female and lived in a small town in Australia. I always take my 13-year-old Jack Russell mix for a 20-ish minute walk down the road around 7 to 7:30 p.m. On this night, I had to take him at about 8:30 as I worked late. The sun was just setting to the point where I can see, but not too well. That could have just been my poor eyesight, but it was enough to manage without needing a flashlight. Although I did have one one on me. I just didn't want to use it yet. We had just made our loop around a small community garden. As I was leaving the gate, I looked to my right and saw a person in all black walking towards me. I was also wearing all black, so we both looked pretty suspicious, if I may say so myself. But out of panic, I crossed the road and headed left. They did the same. Not 1 second later. I'm a naturally fast walker, but I made myself even faster. All I had to do was cross the road one more time and turn right to go down a few houses. Then I was home. I walked faster, but not enough to where it was obvious. Why not? Why not run away from these guys? Get as much distance as you can. This person didn't cross the road but turned right and stayed on the other side. We were parallel on the street. I knew that if they crossed I could run and I wasn't too far from home. But then they know where you live. So when I got into my yard, the person stopped across the road at this point. I realized the door was locked and I didn't have a key. The person stayed across the road, so I rang the bell. Pounding on the door, my older brother answered and the person had just made it into our yard. My brother told the person to fuck off and he walked back to the way he came. My brother asked who that was and I had to explain this all to him. From this day forward, I take my dog for a walk before work early morning rather than after work at night. I do enjoy sunset walks, but for my safety I stopped, even after a year. You need to get bear spray or something to protect yourself because even early in the morning, people can come out too. A knife? No. This happened pretty recently. I'm a 23-year-old female working in property management. I was not supposed to be working alone that day, but my manager and coworker called in sick. My other coworker had requested time off that we all forgot about. I voiced my concerns because the property is in a crime-ridden area and I have had some bad experience in the past. I actually transitioned into a different role because I no longer felt safe, but they offered me a lot of money to come back, and here I am. The front doors stay unlocked during business hours, so literally, anybody could walk in. Also, it's a large, busy property. I needed someone with me just to help with all the tours and residents. Nobody was able to do anything, so I called one of our sister properties and begged for their leaser to help me. They agreed, but the leaser was going to have to leave early. Fine, I said. I was just happy to have some help. Flash forward to an hour before closing and the leaser had to go. Literally as she walked out, this disgruntled man walked in holding a duffel bag. I hate to profile anybody, but he was clearly homeless, not out there mentally. He walked up to me and handed me his ID. I asked him how I could get help, and all I could say was, "You don't respect veterans." What? I again asked how I could help him, and he couldn't give me a straight answer. I was confused and getting fed up with the coworker who had requested a day off. Happened to come in to just say hi. My coworker instantly knew something was off, so he came over to investigate. This guy didn't like my coworker, asking him all these questions. He opened up his duffel bag and started sorting through it. He pulled out a piece of women's lingerie and threw it on my desk. Then he pulled out a box, and in the box was an SD card. He was trying to put it into my computer, and I told him to not do that. He listened to me, but proceeded to rummage through his bag. He seemed this point, I am scared shitless that he's going to pull out a gun and light us all up. Instead of a gun, he pulls out a knife. Instantly, both my coworker and myself start screaming at him to put the knife away and leave. Knowing of all the mass shootings that have taken place, we were both paralyzed in fear. He eventually put the knife away but refused to leave. I messaged my manager who was out sick but lived on site. The police called the police and told him there was a guy with a knife in the office. My coworker who was with me didn't physically force him out, but he guided him out by walking towards him, making himself look threatening. Finally, the dude leaves and we immediately locked the doors. He kept trying to come back in and was cussing up a storm outside. Eventually, he made his way to a convenience store that is attached to the building. Within 30 seconds of going in, about 4 squad cars pull up. We pointed at the store and they ran in there. The guy got aggressive with the police, so they beat him up and ended up detaining him. I told the police to look in his bag for the knife and they found it. I identified the weapon and answered some of the police's questions. I did not press charges because this was clearly a mental health crisis. Jail isn't going to reform him. He needs serious professional help. The district attorney pressed charges on my behalf and the courts granted me a protection order. Or order of protection, either way. They also let him go without bail. The last update I got was that he didn't show up to his court hearing, and now there's a warrant out for his arrest. I wonder why he didn't show up. I've not seen him since the event took place. Not yet. There needs to be a panic button or something in your workplace, because if it's in a bad part of town, you're going to get different people like this that are going to make you feel uncomfortable, that are going to possibly invade your space, that might bring a gun in and shoot you. I think you got very lucky. Very lucky. Moving on to scariest. True creepy encounters. A few years back, I lived with my mother and a German Shepherd in a 2-bedroom rented townhome. I get home from work one day. Went about my daily routine. When it came time to eat dinner, I knocked on my mom's door, wanting her to come and eat with me. I smelled cigarette smoke and heard her grunt a response. I went back downstairs and I ate alone. I figured I would just put a plate away for her in the fridge. Fast forward about 2 a.m. I'm awoken by someone holding my hand and gently shaking it. I immediately shoot straight up and look around. My dog, who is overly protective and sleeps with me every night, is not in bed. She isn't even in the room. She most definitely was on my bed when I went to sleep. I sleep with my bedroom door shut and locked. She is scratching at my door. My closed door and locked bedroom door from the hallway. Frantically, I pulled for the door, let her in, and she is searching the whole room, smelling, sniffing every corner. I'm now yelling for my mother. No answer. I force my dog to walk with me down the long hallway. I still smell cigarette smoke. I bang on my mom's door now. No answer. I opened it. She isn't even home. The bed is made and her TV is off. My dog and I searched the entire house. Nothing is out of place. All the doors and windows are still locked. Freaked out, to say the least. The next day I called my mom and she told me she left early the day before to go visit my accessible by a long gravel road that brought you to a cluster of dilapidated buildings around a central barn. We parked at the end of the gravel road near the turnoff to the main road so we could walk around the property and just pull out quickly later. We went into the barn first. Here's where it gets really creepy. There were deer bones arranged in a circle around the skull. A bunch of blankets and wood stacked in the corner of the room. This really looked cultish. Weird. We got out of there and started walking back to the car. But it doesn't end there. Halfway down the gravel road, we hear crunching, heavy footsteps and someone screeching behind us. Blood-curdling scream. We sprinted back to my car and tried to peel out of there as fast as possible, but it had snowed the night prior. My back tire was stuck in a puddle of melted snow. My friend, now screaming hysterically because she is so freaked out about all that had happened, would not turn to look at the path behind us. By the time I had gotten the car unstuck, she turned around to see if there was someone following us. And there is no one there. I don't know. I tell myself it could have been a bird or something, but we both swear up and down that this day that was a person's scream. There was somebody following us. A bird does not crunch the stone or gravel and does not scream like that. I actually thought I was going to die that day. A clan ritual. A friend of mine who I believe is trustworthy was driving home on a country road late one night. He decided to take the gravel shortcut past an old cemetery. He noticed several trucks and lights at the cemetery, so he started to pull over to see what the hell was going on. There was a bunch of these MFs in white hoodies in a circle. Some sort of clan ritual or meeting, we think, but obviously we don't really know what was going on. He got out of there really fast, but some of them saw him and started following him to his car all the way back to town. Luckily, nothing ever happened. They just were trying to make sure he never came back. Walking in the dark. I visited my ex-mother-in-law in rural Georgia over the summer a couple of years ago. We were talking deep rural south. No light pollution, so you can see a billion stars in the actual Milky Way across the sky. The night I went is one of those slim crescent moons. It was darker outside than usual, and the crescent looked like it was blood red. I can't see my hand, the end of my outstretched arm. That level of dark. I'm walking their little rat terrier around the yard along the edge of a forest. I'm probably 200 yards from a little trailer that they had on their property, which is the only source of light besides my flashlight. This little dog stops dead in his tracks and starts, no kidding, trembling. He looks up at me with his eyes popping out. I hear a rustle of leaves and a twig snap. Maybe 10 to 20 feet to my left. I scoop up this little dog and start power walking back to the house, looking in all directions with the flashlight. Once I get halfway back, I hear a blood-curdling, high-pitched scream from hell. Sounded like a woman was getting stabbed. Shit, this is some hills have eyes. I'm gonna die. I ran as fast as I could back to the trailer. say that this is a little bit creepy, but in a weird way comforting. My grandmother told me this story. It was a no-nonsense kind of broad. I believe every word of it. My grandmother had a neighbor who was a friend who unfortunately lost her husband when she was young, only 40. It was a sudden death, cardiac arrest. This woman was so upset because for a couple of years after his death, she could not dream of her husband. For some odd reason, it really bothered her that she could not experience a dream with him in it. It was almost like she wanted it for the comfort. Anyway, time passes and the woman is preparing to sell her house and move closer to her kids. They lived an entire state over, so it was really lonely for her. Suddenly, she gets her wish. She starts dreaming and her husband is in all of them. She has multiples of these dreams, and in every one her husband wakes her up, sits down in the bed and starts speaking to her. However, his speech horrifies her. It was described as backwards or garbled. That's petrifying. I imagine it to be something similar to the way a Twin Peaks character speaks in the Black Lot. So, pretty goddamn creepy. You can't make a single word out. A few days before she moves out for good, she goes to bed and dreams of him again. The dream is the same, except she understands one word he says. He grabs in the dream and repeatedly says, rafters. Seemingly panicked, she wakes up rattled but returns to sleep. The next day, as she's finishing up packing in the basement, she looks up and sees the rafters. She recalls the dream and is compelled to reach into them. She does and pulls out thousands of dollars worth of, oh my god, World War II bonds her husband had purchased without her knowledge and didn't have the time to tell her, for he died so quickly. She swears on her life he never told her about them. That is giving, I have goosebumps all over my body. He appeared to her in her dream to tell her so she would not leave all of those bonds behind when she sold the house. That gives me chills. That absolutely gives me chills. Mystery tooth fairy. So I can't really say that this is creepy or horrifying to some, but more of an unsolved mystery to me. When I was 5, the tooth fairy came and left me a quarter for my tooth. She left me this beautiful, intricately carved wooden pencil box. In the morning, my parents both asked me where I got this pencil box, and they were sincerely surprised. I told them the tooth fairy brought it. 30 years later, my parents swear up and down they have no idea who gave me that box. They confess tons of other things they did. I believe them when they say it wasn't them. Neither one of my parents knows how to carve wood or what this was hand carved. I would like to know where that thing came from and who put it there. My God, that would terrify me. Like, sincerely seeing my parents asking me at the same time, where did you get that? And it had been next to my head under a pillow. Shop of horror. When I was young, my mother and grandmother and I liked to go to this little foo-foo tea shop that was about 40 miles from our house. It was really a quaint, cute little place where you could get the classic tea, sandwiches, and cute little desserts. One time we went, all was normal. But on the way home, we received a call that my other grandma had passed away. Extremely sad, but as she had been battling cancer, it It was not exactly unexpected. The next time we went, a few months later on the way home, we received a call that my uncle had died suddenly of a heart attack. Odd coincidence for sure, but we still did not think too much of it at the time. I mean, who would link these two together? We go back a third time a few months after that, and for the third time on our way home, we received a phone call that someone had died. This time it was my grandfather's brother. We never went back to that tea shop again. Now, all of these people were elderly and not exactly in the best of health. Them passing away around the same time was not too creepy, but the fact that 3 separate times we went to this place, 3 people died that same day, and we received calls on the way home. Makes me think something about that place was either evil or fortuitous. Oddly it is, since closed, but I am still nervous to go to that area to this day, because it might not have even been the tea room itself. It could have been the drive. Another haunted tea room. 2001 to 2003 in Morgantown, Indiana, a place called Auntie M's Tea Room. It is no longer there. On three separate occasions while cleaning up after closing time, I heard what sounded like a tiny child crying. It was soft, and every time I tried to walk towards the sound, it seemed to grow further away, like it was moving into a different part of the restaurant altogether. Unnerving, to say the least. My friend worked there with me, and once after hours she heard me call her name from inside the stock room. At the same time, I heard that crying child. And then on another occasion, when she heard me call her name, I heard her call my name from the front of the restaurant. We ran into each other on our way to answer the calls. We were all very confused, and we realized both times neither of us had actually called the other at all. Lastly, and most chilling, two people I knew passed away very shortly after eating at Auntie M's, and I was the person that served them their last meals on both occasions. One passed in an accident, and the other of a heart attack. It was just their time to go. But maybe it wasn't. It really creeps me out that in that restaurant I served 2 different people their last meals on Earth. I don't know about you, but abandoned amusement parks scare the hell out of me. When I was younger, I'd explore abandoned places with my friends. I know it's not the smartest thing to do, for we could have been truly hurt. But the weirdest experience was at this abandoned amusement park we went to. The last time we had been there, a skeleton of a cat had fallen from a ceiling tile inside one of those buildings, freaking one of my friends out. But I wasn't there, so I really can't promise or profess or tell the sincerity of that incident. But this park has a long walk to get to the entrance, and the gate had been bent just enough that you could step through it at the right angle. We walked quite a ways, probably a mile across the field to get to this gate, and we stepped inside. first building is some sort of old storefront type thing. We walked up to it, and one of my friends noticed a light coming from inside, and we all fell silent as he steps forward to peek in. He looks back at us wide-eyed, and naturally, the urban explorers, rest of us go over to the doorway to check what he saw. The entire wall opposite of us was on fire. It looked like it had been purposely lit. No less than 10 minutes before we got there, we sprinted back to our cars. After that, we never went back. Things seem to happen when nobody is home. At least, that's what happened to me. A few years ago, I was desperately trying to get hold of my parents for some emergency on the extended family, but neither of them would answer their cell phone. So I called their home phone. The line picked up. It sounded like somebody was talking, but distorted. 10 seconds, the line went dead. This is at 9 p.m. My parents called me back around 10:30. They had been at a movie which started at 8:30. They live alone. A stranger's gift. This is going on as we speak, but I'm going to take you back a couple of months when it all started. One nice warm day at the end of August, early September, I go outside and find this little ball of fur, feathers, hair, and a dangling earring hooked in on my porch. Weird. That is weird. I brought it up to my husband and said that there was some weird juju shit on our porch. It's freaking me out. I was not touching it, but I needed to go. It needed to go. He suggested that it was a nice gift from the tomcat next door, or something that our dog dragged home. My dog has never done that before, but hey, away. More logical than someone leaving weird juju shit on our front porch. I believe it cool. But then last week, this fully intact lower mandible bone of a white-tailed deer shows up on our porch in the exact place as where the hair feather fur ball was placed. Again, I get my husband, I ask him about it. He says that the dog must have brought it with him. Again, something that he's never done, but logical. I still wasn't going to touch it. The weird fur feather earring ball was still fresh in my mind, and if someone was leaving weird shit on my porch, I wasn't going to touch it. Thanks for taking the danger on, hon. It stayed in the porch for quite a while. Yesterday I was studying, facing my front door around lunchtime. My dog starts freaking out and I looked up. There is this older, disheveled-looking lady on the porch I have never seen before, walking towards our front door. She proceeds to place something on our porch we have out there and turns around, walks away. After a beat, I get up to grab whatever pamphlet she left on the porch, except she didn't have a pamphlet. She came onto our porch, took the lower mandible bone, and moved it onto the bench, right in the middle of two posts of the porch fence, right in line with a bright ray of sunshine. I am now pretty convinced that there is someone leaving weird shit on our porch, and hoping she's not cursing us, because we have never done anything wrong. This is one of my biggest fears, especially for my daughter. Abducted in plain sight. My family and I went to Dubai in Sometimes you hear those voices. Sometimes they're good, and other times they don't guide you in the right direction. But this time a voice saved my life. I was in a major car accident that almost took my life over 10 years ago. My car was hit by another car in such a way that I lost control. The car went full circle on the highway. I T-boned a Jersey wall, completely destroying it, cracking the next two in line. I bounced off that onto an off-ramp and with my side of the car facing traffic. I'm about to exhale when I hear, "Hey kid, when I start counting, you have 8 seconds to move your car or you're going to be hit by an 18-wheeler. Do you understand?" 8, 7, 6. Voice didn't have to tell me twice. I threw my car into drive and got onto the shoulder as an 18-wheeler drove right by where my car was parked. I should have died, according to the cops surveying the crash site later, but I walked away with more than a few bruises, but my life. I needed a root canal a few days later. I probably imagined the voice, but damn, I'm believing it was something otherworldly. I would say somebody had died in that exact same place. And saved your life. Driving through Iowa, North Dakota, we pass this semi-truck that has a older Buick wrapped around like half a donut around the front of its lights. The guy was so pressed into the car, there was nothing left of him. You could see the line of tire tracks almost a mile down the road. The truck had tried to slam on his brakes, but this car was coming onto the interstate. Didn't stay right, but literally went straight in front of him, making the truck T-bone him at full speed. We passed this. The police hadn't even shown up yet. We just stared at this vehicle that was not even 5 inches wide, knowing what was held inside. Bell-bottom ghost. When I was 9, 1995, in the middle of a bright summer day, I went to the refrigerator to get a popsicle. Suddenly, a roughly teenage-looking guy with long brown hair, wearing a beige turtleneck and red plaid bell-bottoms, turned around the corner into the hallway to my left, then vanished from toe to head as I looked at him. I told no one about it for years until after my mother mentioned meeting the now grown kids who lived in the house before us, who asked her if she'd seen the bell-bottom ghost. A friend, walking home in a forest at night with a friend at 2 a.m. We were 14. Yeah, we should have not been out that late, but let's just say we were having a good time talking and doing what 14-year-olds do when they're out till 2 a.m. When out of nowhere, our friend shows up and starts talking to us. Our friend started chatting with us, and I felt a really strong sense of euphoria. This friend knew both of our names and things that he should not have, like exact details of inside saw my friend. I kind of just knew he was with us, and I can't recall his voice. Although I remember him asking to take us to his house. Just turn left. My actual real friend luckily had the same sense that I had, not to let me go, thank goodness. That left turn led to this unfenced lookout with a 5-meter drop to rocks. I don't even want to think about what would have happened if I had listened to that quote-unquote friend. Scared me to death. Lost key. My friend asked me if I would go to her house after work and feed her dog, as she would not be home until 3 a.m. or so because she worked as a bartender. So I arrived at her house at around 8:30 p.m. and got a key she had left under the mat to unlock the door. Once I unlocked the door, I turned off the alarm, put the key in a white bowl by the door. I'm 100% sure I put the key in the bowl. I fed the dog, played with him for a while, then went to lock up the house again and leave, but the key was gone. Just then, the dog started furiously barking and ran full speed out of the kitchen and up the stairs. He sat growling at nothing. The feeling that came over me is odd and strange and almost unexplainable. The feeling was painful. I randomly burst out crying and I couldn't stop. Eventually, I calmed myself down, put the dog back into the kitchen, and looked for the key. Literally, it was nowhere. I ended up finding another key that worked. I locked up and left the house. I told my friend and she looked for a week. Then one day, the key was back in the bowl. Why didn't you call the police? There could have been somebody in her bedroom. If you know you put a key somewhere and a dog is freaking out at a room or something, somebody is in there that shouldn't be. Probably somebody followed you in. A shadow person. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister. Our family dog, it kind of looked like a short-haired lassie that would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. I was about 6 years old. I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was blacker than black, without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake my sister up, but she rolled over to go back to sleep, ignoring me. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure that was at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke up my sister, and she too saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, there was nothing there. Nothing there. Speaking in tongues. My wife has told me that very occasionally I talk in my sleep in other languages. She has no idea what I'm saying, but the language sounds a little bit familiar to her. When smartphones became a thing, she recorded me once. I listened to it the next day and thought I was speaking Italian, since some of the sounds and cadences were similar. I don't know Italian, so that seemed really odd. I shared it with a guy who grew up in Italy. Turns out I was speaking Latin, which he had learned as a student. I studied a bit of Latin as a kid. It's long gone now, though I can recognize some words and know some Latin conjugations. He said that as far as he could tell, it was pretty grammatically correct, and I was talking about a mountain and a lake. Weird as hell. son was born, my boyfriend's father died. I had never met his father, yet I had heard stories of his twisted sense of humor and how he liked to screw with people. My boyfriend not particularly close with his dad. We lived in North Carolina. His dad had taken off to Seattle when my boyfriend was very young. I don't think my boyfriend really grieved until our son was born and he realized that his dad would never meet his son, our son. That really hit him hard. Over the first month of caring for our newborn, we started to notice screws had fallen out of household items, kitchen chairs, towel racks, screen doors, outlet covers, the most random shit. More than a dozen loose screws in the span of a week. This is kind of weird. Yeah, this is really weird. Especially since it never happened before. We were sleep-deprived parents and didn't really have the mental stamina to waste energy trying to figure it out. One day we're just relaxing in the living room and a screw falls out of the light fixture, lands on my boyfriend's lap. He starts laughing hysterically so hard he can't breathe. He finally calms down enough to tell me what the hell set him off. He holds up the screw and says, "I finally get it. My dad is screwing with me. Never had a screw loose since." That gave me goosebumps. Footsteps. When I was younger, I would hear footsteps coming down the hall, and I'd be sweating and panicking, and when my door would open slowly, there would be nobody there. As a youngster, me and my brother were staying up late playing video games. We didn't have school the next morning. It is now 3 a.m. and we decided to shut it down and go to bed. My room is at the end of the hall and my brother's was right next to mine. After we shut off the game and put the controllers away, we both hear these heavy, slow footsteps coming from the kitchen. The kitchen was the only room without carpet, so they sounded pretty ominous. We gave each other a weird look and called out down the hall, "Dad." The footsteps sounds trailed back towards our laundry room and stopped. That's also where our basement door is. We knew something was not right. We both start yelling for our mom and dad, and they come rushing to us, sleepy and confused. We frantically explain what we heard. My dad goes and checks it out and tells us that all the doors are still locked, closed, and there wasn't anything showing anyone had been in the house. Plausible explanation could be that it was just a murderer that broke in and scurried off. We called out, but I was always wondering, what if it was a murderer ghost instead? Very rarely do you find a ghost that will murder you. That is a lot of energy. Night visitor. My dad was telling me this story when he was just out of college and visited friends in California. Prior to the Night Stalker killings in the 80s, my mom stayed home because she was not feeling well. She was pregnant with me at the time. My dad was sleeping on his friend's couch, and he heard someone walking around. He called out his friend's name, then his roommates, and walking stopped. He heard a window close after that, then nothing. It is very possible that someone had climbed in the back window, was in the house, and my 6'4", 240-pound college football player of a dad scared him off by calling out. It's a dark joke that my dad scared Richard Ramirez away, but my mom hates thinking about it because the dates and location works out that he would have been right there in his early years, possibly trying out she is here. I used to do hospice home care, which is an extremely difficult job. People are actively dying, they see things. The thing is, it's almost always a friend or family who have passed on before them, angels or demons even. Never a random dog or a kid they never met or played at spaghetti or anything like that, just people that they had known. I don't know the only rational explanation. It's cultural. Even if you're not a believer, everyone hears a story about white light and beckoning relatives and angels and demons, and that's what people see when their oxygen levels drop and their bodies are shutting down. They start hallucinating. But the explanation that scares the fuck out of me, someone with one foot in this world and one in the next can see things I can't. Well, let me tell you a story, a scary story, the scariest one I have ever encountered. It was a man who seemed totally lucid. Normally dying people don't make a ton of sense. They will occasionally say something like, "My son is here, can you see him?" And then back to nonsense. This guy was otherwise in his right mind, except he was telling me about his wife who was sitting at the bed, the end of his bed. She had dyed her hair again, despite him always liking her natural gray. But at least she had on that blue dress she looked good in, always looked so good in. He had a perfectly rational conversation with her about how he missed her, but the doctor said he would see her soon and not to fret. He told her that he wasn't scared, that he knew he was a very old man and, well, no one lives forever. Part of me thinks he was just having an experience, a death hallucination, but you know what? Deep inside, part of me thinks she was really there. I do believe she was there. I couldn't see her, but I almost could feel her. I always worry one day I will be able to see what they see. What then? What do I do then? Because I have no explanation to explain it away. Now I can't tell you how important this is, that you lock your doors. No matter if you feel safe or you live in a darker part of town, a creepier part of town, a dangerous part of town. Even where I live, it's very dark at night. And when I got to my car, if I leave it outside, I feel like there's somebody behind me or possibly in my car. So be careful. Be careful. But I lived in one of the oldest apartments in town. Couldn't sleep one night. Eventually I must have dozed off as I started having an incredibly vivid dream of myself lying in bed. Everything the exact same as it was in real life. Except one thing. My door opened a little bit, creaked, then it opened again, a little bit more, and a little bit more. An old, creepy lady started ominously walking towards me from the hallway. I immediately pulled upright in bed, wide awake, freaking out. my memory. My son, now 4, we are driving home from somewhere when he pipes up in the back seat. Hey Mom, do you remember the night the aliens tried to take me from your belly and you said no? Oh my god, that just gave me freaking chills. I have goosebumps all from my head to my toes. Holy shit. I'm sorry. I don't even know what to say. Like, that is, what? The goosebumps were instant. My husband and I just looked at each other out of the corner of our eyes. This still freaks us both out to this day. It was his sincerity and his exact memory of where it was. Grandfather. I used to work at a drugstore. I always worked the night shift. So one night I was closing another store in our chain and we had a snow squall that unexpectedly dropped a few feet of snow in our area. Unfortunately, I was not very familiar with the area. I had my mother's car, so I wasn't used to the car either. The snow is still coming down. I couldn't see. I was slowly creeping home and panicking as I saw cars spinning out all around me. All of a sudden, I saw a light in my passenger side view mirror. I turned my head, sitting in the passenger seat, plain as day. I saw my dead grandfather. I heard him say he knew that I was not freaked out by a little snow and that I heard his voice rattling off all the things he taught me about driving in the snow. I looked back towards the road and he was gone. It calmed me when I saw him. It was more like, okay, Pop's here, I'm okay, instead of, oh my god, you're supposed to be dead. I stopped panicking and I got home without incident. Most likely, just my brain and eyes, whatever, playing tricks on me to get me to stop panicking. But to this day, I wonder, and it breaks me out just a little bit. Have you ever heard a little voice with the most evil, sinister laugh, giggling in your room, or in your house, or behind a closet door in the basement? I have many times. My family and I woke up one night to the sound of manic, eerie laughter, like evil laughing. All of us heard it, coming from the attic. My dad, being not superstitious or scared of anything, was white as a ghost. He pulled the attic ladder down and went up to find an old dairy cow alarm clock that had faulty sound randomly going off. I don't know if I believe any supernatural activity made it go off, but this is such an old alarm clock. Why would it go off then? But hearing a manic evil laugh in the middle of the night from the attic was terrifying. That's really kind of strange, if you ask me. One time I drove back to college after Christmas, but before the winter break was over. I was the first of my roommates to get back to the house we were renting. Our house in an isolated spot on the outskirts of town in upstate New York. I pulled into the driveway behind the house, went to the trunk and grabbed one of my bags, ran inside. I had to use the bathroom really bad. I'd been on the road for 5 hours. I was inside the house using the restroom for 5 minutes or so. Afterwards, I went back outside to get the rest of my stuff from the car, and there were footprints in the was another set of footprints circling the car leading into the woods and the back of the property. It appeared that the footprints had originally come from the woods. I left my trunk open when I was inside because I assumed I was alone. Nothing had been taken, but someone had seen me arrive, come out of the woods, circle my car, and return to the woods. I grabbed the rest of my stuff, locked my car, ran into the house, and locked the doors. And why didn't you call the police? That's not a ghost. That is not something you made up. That is somebody who was stalking you. I have been to many mountain cottages. I would say half of them have proven to be quite haunted. But this time we moved into a cottage in the mountains. My backyard was a tree line. The moon lit everything so beautifully. It hardly seemed like a night at all. I began having these weird, reoccurring dreams. The same dream every single time. In my dream, I would see myself laying asleep in my bed. Then it switched from third-person view to first-person view. In the dream, I woke to a whispering female voice. The thirst hit me. In the dream, it was unbearable. I would climb out of bed, open the French doors, and head to the kitchen sink to get a glass of water. As I neared the sink, the voice would get louder and louder, but I couldn't make it out. It was as if or a foreign language, but not one I had ever heard before. Standing in my kitchen and looking out at the back window right above the sink to the tree line in my backyard, extremely well lit by the moon's light, the voice suddenly became clear. She said, "The devil is in the woods." At this point, a shadow darted quickly behind the tree line. I would then wake up from my dream, standing in my kitchen in the exact spot that I was in the dream. This happened every single week for the entire duration of the time I lived in that house. It also has happened close or right at 3 a.m. Right at 3 a.m. And we all know that's the devil's hour. Ghost Mom. I remember one time as a child, I was home on Saturday morning. For a bit of context, back then my mom would usually go into work on Saturday mornings, and she would be home by 12. I was sitting on the couch watching TV. The time started approaching 12, which meant that my mother was going to be home soon. I very vividly remember hearing a car door close, hearing the car lock, and my mom walking into the house calling my name. When I got up to go greet her, there was no one there. The window. Never look out your window. When I was younger, my older cousin lived with us for a little bit because she was having behavioral problems at home. My parents had to go at night to pick someone up from the airport, and they left my brother and I with her. My mother and I were both in bed. My brother and I were both in bed with her. I think it was a school night. Now, she got up and went into the other room to do homework or something. She finishes up and she comes into the room to lay down with us, but as soon as she opens the door, our house alarm starts going off. She quickly shut the door and came over to me to tell me to be quiet before going back to hold the door closed since it didn't have a lock. My brother, who was older than me by a year, wakes up very confused about what the hell is going on. The alarm's going off. We are all terrified out of is said and done, we found out through the alarm company that the window in my parents' room is what tripped the alarm. And that's the room we moved to. To this day, my parents are convinced she was just trying to sneak in a boyfriend or something like that, but I'm certain she was not, that there was someone trying to rob the place, or worse. They got scared up by the alarm because of how completely terrified my cousin looked. If she was expecting somebody, she wouldn't have been so afraid. No, 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 no. I've had an extremely strange experience personally. I don't know whether to chalk it up to my 12-year-old brain at the time or if it actually was one of the paranormal nature. My very best friend used to live in this house that was technically two houses merged into one. Both were extremely old. I'm talking over 150 years. The first night that I ever slept over, he told me about how a woman who lived in one of the houses lost her mind one day and drowned her children in a basin in the back many, many years ago. This all happened around 4 a.m. I woke up in the middle of the night needing a drink of water. I came out of his bedroom passing the staircase that leads to the second floor on my right, walk out into the kitchen. On my way back to his room, for some reason I stopped dead in my tracks at the foot of the stairs, which I hadn't really been looking at in my haste to make it back to his room. I turned my head to look at them, and instead of a staircase leading up to the second floor, there was a set of stairs going downwards in an intense angle into what seemed like a basement or nothingness. It was pitch black. I stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, just gazing into the abyss that was before me. It wasn't there before. My brain could not register it as even strange. As then I heard an ear-piecing. No, I meant it sounded like it came from inside of my head. It was a woman's voice screaming, no, no, no. Needless to say, I booked it back to his room, and I have not really said anything about it since it happened. The weird thing is that I can remember it like it was yesterday, even though it was so many